Welcome back. We're going to finish off that little module on kinship now with a look at whether kinship names can influence cognition. You might think that the names you use for people are ways that you can interact with them and know who's who when you're trying to refer to them. That's because you have a shared set of symbols you use to refer to concepts or individuals in the world that the people you communicate with also understand and have the same representation of. That means that your language has dissected the complicated world of family trees in a particular way that allows you and another member of your linguistic community to communicate. But can these kinship terms influence cognition? One of the important features that I want to get at here is the idea that we are looking for the influence of language, not just in knowing who's who, but on some non-linguistic process, not just differences in naming, but differences that might influence an ancillary process that doesn't need to use language, but might have used language anyway. So we're going to look at the influence of language on memory using the example of kinship terms. So in one fabulous study by Angoro and Gentner, participants were shown a series of picture cards. The pictures depicted family relationships like handing each other bowls or washing dishes together. And participants were just asked to look at the pictures, and that they were also told that they would be asked questions about them later. So here's an example of one of the pictures in the task up the top. The standard form of the picture was that the older sister gives a bowl to the younger sister. Now, in this illustration, both of the people are female gender, and the participant knows that all of the relationships in this deck have to do with siblings. Now, what's interesting about the sibling tier of vocabulary is that English and Indonesian treat this area of kinship differently. In Indonesian, we have words that differentiate between older siblings and younger siblings, while in English, we have words that differentiate between male siblings and female siblings. So you see how the obligatory marking of seniority versus the obligatory marking of gender might cause people to look at this scene in different ways. So in the standard picture that was presented during the exposure phase of the trial, we have two sisters handing a bowl between them. The older sister is handing a bowl to the younger sister. In the test phase, which comes some minutes later after participants have had a chance to forget all about the pictures that they've seen, they saw a series of pictures that sometimes were identical to scenes that they had seen before, and sometimes had a variation on the image that they had seen before. The variation involved either reversing the gender of one of the participants in the picture or reversing the seniority of the different agents involved in the action. So here we can see a gender flipped example where the older sister gives the bowl to a younger brother instead of a younger sister, and a seniority variant on the right where the younger sister gives a bowl to the older sister. So the inversion of seniority roles. Now, what we can see is, given the structural differences in kinship terminology between these two languages, we should predict that one of these two scenes will be easier to detect for speakers of different languages. And what I mean by easier to detect is how easy it is for you to pick out that this is not an image that you saw before. So what we can see here is a representation of the memory task and the percentage of false alarms each person gave. So how many times did they incorrectly recognize an image that they had never seen before as one of the images that they had seen before? And what we can see is, for English speakers, we have an upward slope where they were much worse at correctly identifying that they had not seen a seniority variant before than they were at detecting a gender variant was not one of the images that they had seen before. And we see the exact opposite pattern for the speakers of Bahasa Indonesia. For the speakers of Bahasa Indonesia, we saw more errors for the gender flipped than for the seniority flipped case. So what we're seeing here is a beautiful example of how languages that may have structural differences in the way that they carve up objects for classification may have knock-on consequences for some other property of cognition, in this case, memory. Now, it's very important to note here that these images were not described verbally. If there was any verbal description, the participant was internally creating their own narrative monologue. They were not asked to describe the pictures to themselves in words, but perhaps they did. Perhaps that's something that we all do from time to time, either intentionally or unintentionally, or when we are trying to remember something for the future, we might invoke that strategy explicitly. But that is a strategy that causes us to be biased in a way that is aligned with the linguistic structure of our language. And that's where we finish up our little module on kinship terms.